7. Let's start on Wall Street. The closing bell rang just moments ago. The Dow climbed more than 100 points higher today as investors digest a firing at the Federal Reserve. After months of attacks launched at the central bank, President Trump sent a letter telling Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, "You're fired." So the firing comes amid allegations Cook made false statements on 2 home mortgage applications to try and secure lower interest rates. President Trump says once he replaces Cook, he'll have a majority on the Fed board.
Once we have a majority, housing is going to swing and it's going to be great. People are paying too high an interest rate. That's the only problem with housing. We have to get the rates down a little bit. And when we do, it's going to be a tremendous difference.
So Cook says no cause for her firing exists under the law and she's not going anywhere. Cook's lawyer says she will sue President Trump for the firing. The Federal Reserve issued a statement that reads in part, quote, Congress, through the Federal Reserve Act, directs that governors serve in long fixed terms and may be removed by the president only for cause. Long tenures and approval protections for governors serve as a vital safeguard, ensuring that monetary policy decisions are based on data, economic analysis, and the long-term interests of the American people. It goes on to say, quote, Lisa Cook has indicated through her personal attorney that she will promptly challenge this action in court and seek a judicial decision that would confirm her ability to continue to fulfill her responsibilities as a Senate-confirmed member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. All right, with that, I want to bring in CBS News MoneyWatch correspondent Kelly O'Grady to break all of this down. First and foremost, does the president have the power to fire Cook? Will this hold up?
So the answer is yes, but. So there's some complications here. So the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 says that the president does have the power to fire a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors or even the chair. Remember, he had threatened to do this with Chair Powell a bit back, but it needs cause. The thing here, though, is that cause is not defined. And so that's really where the ambiguity comes in. Right now, as you mentioned, there are allegations of mortgage fraud. And certainly every legal scholar that I have talked to has said that Lisa Cook will have to answer questions and explain why she filed those 2 mortgage applications and designated both as her primary residence. That is raising questions, but it is not charged yet. There is no conviction. So these are just allegations. And that's why you are hearing from pretty much everyone that this is likely going to go to the courts. And it could even go to the Supreme Court if it were to get far enough, because this question of cause has not been dealt with before. There is no precedent for this, no case law that anyone can point to and say, yes, that's exactly what they would need in order to fire her, or anyone for that matter, on the Board of Governors or the chair. And so there's a lot of ambiguity here in the law, and that's why the president does have the power if this is determined to be enough cause.
So if this firing goes through, Trump could basically replace Cook with someone more quote-unquote cooperative and then gain a majority on the Fed board. But what would that mean for the Fed's independence?
Yeah, so every person that is on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors has been appointed by, a sitting president in the past. I mean, remember, President Trump himself appointed Chair Jerome Powell as the chair during his first term. And so they sit in that role for 14 years. And so you would expect to see President Trump, if this were to go through and Cook were removed, to replace her with someone that would be more favorable to those interest rate cuts. And that clip that you played, he essentially says, we would gain a majority. We would get people to vote for interest rate cuts and the housing market and everything would be great. I think what's important, though, is that might be what the president is hoping for. But you also have these members that are going to be in those roles for many years, and they are charged with a dual mandate: inflation and the labor market, and looking at the economic data. So yes, you might have someone that comes into that role and says, I'd like to do a rate cut in September or October or whatever it might be, but that doesn't mean for sure they're going to vote that way in the future, for the next number of years. It's a long term, and so that's going to be something that wouldn't maybe always go the president's way.
Sure. Okay, so in other countries where the president has influence over interest rates, how does it play out?
Well, Argentina is a really good example. They've had double-digit inflation for quite some time. And the reasoning is that when the political party in play, and remember, this would set a precedent for Democrat, Republican, whatever, to have influence in the future. No sitting president that is going for an election again is going to want to raise interest rates, because people like you and me, we want low mortgage rates, we want cheap money, we want to be able to borrow at a lower interest rate. But when you have lower interest rates, that encourages spending, and that's where you do see inflation creep up. And so in other countries, you do see that influence does lead to higher inflation. Doesn't mean that it would here. And by the way, this does not mean that the president will have influence over the Federal Reserve if this were to go through. It's just a question that investors are asking at this point.
Yeah, and very good insight, Kelly. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.